Okay, so the definition of germination is when the first root goes through that seed coat. It has to absorb water to create osmotic pressure for it to crack open. Does require some environmental signals like a specific wavelength of light, usually red, appropriate germination temperature, so warmer temperatures, and then stratification periods of low temperature exposure so it doesn't freeze. So seed coat helps anchor it in the soil. It does require some energy source, like starch is usually stored in the amyloplasty. It's got proteins, fats, and oils. Um, Once seedling is orientated, the leaves emerge from the soil, photosynthesis begins, and now it's generating its own food. Right, the second half of this lecture is plant defense. And if you didn't know, plants are constantly under attack by viruses, bacteria, fungi, animals, as well as other plants. So it does have some physical defenses that allow it to kind of hinder um, herbivores from eating it because maybe it's got way too much wax or something. But enemies can steal nutrient resources or hijack its DNA replicating mechanisms. In some plants, they just kill plants. Like the pathogens kill plant cells immediately. So if you ever see brown on leaves, that means it's going through necrosis. It's dead tissue. So good luck trying to nurture that baby back. But the first line of defense is the dermal tissue. Epidermal cells secrete that wax and that cutin. Helps reduce water loss, but attack because who likes to eat wax unless you like to eat crayons? But the damage can still occur by organisms that can pierce through this. They just have this long needle-like mouthpiece, and they just pierce through that cuticle to get to the vascular tissue, the xylem and the phloem, or they chew it, or they enter through the stomata if they're small enough. Bacteria provide sites for ice nucleation. So if there's enough bacteria and all of a sudden temperatures start to drop, ice crystals will form, and that causes necrosis in plant tissues. We also have mycorrhizae fungi and rhizobacteria that can usually have good relationships. They increase the absorption or they help bring in nitrogen. So the plant can use nitrogen to build more compounds for itself. Some plants have toxin defenses, so it can kill the herbivore or make them ill. Cyanide is made by a plant. It stops the electron transport chain, blocking cellular respiration because you can no longer make ATP. Some plants repel herbivores or predators using strong flavors or smells. So I'm going to talk about some of these chemical arsenals called secondary metabolites. So these are just two big examples, well, three because it's mints and oils, but alkaloids. Okay, so like caffeine is a secondary metabolite. Nicotine, cocaine, morphine. Could you imagine an insect, eating a plant that, you can derive cocaine or morphine from? It's just going to mess them up. They don't know what to do. I don't know. They're just going to be high, little insects, and they're not going to do that great damage because, like I said, they don't know what they're doing. So it can either overstimulate them or even sedate them and slow them down, okay? Tannins bind the proteins and inactivate those proteins. So it makes them feel sick. They're very lethargic, and then all of a sudden they start to associate that flavor because tannins don't taste that great. I mean, you find tannins in wine, and sometimes it gives flavor to wine, but I don't know. Anyways, so if they don't like the flavor or how it makes them feel, maybe they'll try to avoid those plants in the future. Strong odors produced by plant oils, so like the mint family, that's spearmint from walnuts. Plants can also poison other plants. We call this alleolopathy. So they secrete this chemical in the soil that affects neighboring plants and basically kills or shuts them down, either by inhibiting their growth or blocking their seeds from germination. And the reason for this is obviously, hey, they're competing for sunlight to do photosynthesis. So it minimizes shading as well as competition for nutrients in the soil. Works with own as well as different species. So like, for example, the black walnut. If you ever have a black walnut, good luck trying to grow anything else in your front lawn because that's the only tree you're going to see. It will inhibit other black walnuts or affect any other plant. I was talking to Mrs. Minion. She has a black walnut tree and their neighbor does. And she says, yeah, I grew these bushes and they just died. I couldn't keep them alive, so I replanted them. And they just died again. I think it's that black walnut, and it sits about 50 feet away. She's like, I didn't think that, I thought 50 feet would be a big enough area. Nope, it's not, okay? So keep that in mind, although the wood of black walnuts is beautiful. So. All right, humans are susceptible to plant toxins. So you ever read about Socrates? He died from a hemlock extract, basically an alkaloid that paralyzed his motor nerve endings. Ricin, which is from castor beans, it's an alkaloid, 6 times more lethal than cyanide. And what it does is it binds to ribosomes and prevents translation from taking place. So your cells can't make proteins. If your cells can't make proteins, they're going to die. But there are some secondary metabolites that do have medicinal value. Soy and phytoestrogens can lower prostate cancer. Taxol is a drug that's used in breast cancer to fight breast cancer. It's found in a plant called the Pacific yew. So there's some medicinal value there. I guess I could even add like marijuana. Studies show that the oil from marijuana does aid in fighting against cancer. Quinine fights malaria. It's from the bark of a cinchona tree. So, yeah, plants are important because that's usually where we get all of our medicines from. All right, the last thing I want to talk about is, actually there's two things, but how animals help protect plants. So I think I showed you a video with ants and the fungi and the plant. So we have the acacia trees and ants. So the ants protect the trees from herbivores by attacking those herbivores. The tree depends on bees to pollinate them, so they might release a chemical to deter the ants, but not the bees. So there's like some weird combination with its relationships there. Parasitoid wasps, caterpillars, and leaves. So caterpillars obviously eat tons of plant matter before it goes through its metamorphosis to turn into a butterfly or a moth. And so when the plant is wounded, it sends out a response, a chemical, into the air. And this chemical tracks female parasitoid wasps. So this wasp comes to the plant because it's following the chemical trail, and it sees this caterpillar, and it lays fertilized eggs on the body of the caterpillar. And the caterpillar just goes on eating, and all of a sudden the larvae start to develop, and then they hatch, and then those baby larvae wasps eat and kill the caterpillar. So, yeah. All right. There are two types of responses to invaders. Two types of systemic. So static responses, just using chemicals, maybe a morphological feature like thorns or trichomes that I talked about yesterday. But there's an energetic downside with static responses because you have to maintain them whether there's an invader present or not. So it's kind of like the general response. You got to maintain it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The other type of response is called the inducible response, which means you don't have defenses right away, but if someone keeps trying to eat you, okay, now I'm going to utilize those resources to get rid of the predator. So it might be too late, though. Hey, Brooke.
Hi.
FCCLA? So wound responses protect plants from herbivores when it's injured. We have this rapid production of, this case, proteinase inhibitors that can alter signal and pathways. Some examples of these inhibitors: cysteamine, jasmonic acid, and salicylic acid, which is another medicinal value for us. So what they do is they bind to digestive enzymes in the gut of the herbivore, making the herbivore sick. But yeah, that's the lecture in a nutshell. That's all I got for you today. So then on Monday, I will discuss one more plant lecture. Tuesday, I won't see you. Tuesday, we'll have class, but I'm not going to do anything. You guys are taking your ACT. Wednesday, we'll do a review just to get everyone on the same page. I don't know where everyone's at with their homework. And then I think maybe Thursday will be the exam. So, yeah. And then Friday, we'll start dissections. We'll just start with a dissection packet, and then we'll cut it open Monday. So.
You know that